Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue the wonderful book, The World's Greatest Ghost by Roger Bohr. Once again delving into chapter 6, part 2, the theme being Ghosts of Royals and Rulers. Last time we were talking about some of the famous ghosts of Buckingham Palace. This will continue that particular theme. In fact, it'll wrap up this segment here, and then there'll be a little mini segment associated with a corpse in a bed. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's start part 2 here. I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on it. Love to hear, as always, what your thoughts are too. And here's what it says. Of all the hauntings connected with royal buildings, the most intriguing are those of Glamis Castle, the towered and turreted fortress beside Dean Water near Forfar Angus is the Scottish family home of the Queen Mother's family, the Bowes-Lyons. In fact, Princess Margaret was born there, but its 16 feet thick walls have been cloaked with mystery ever since Macbeth usurped the Scottish throne by murdering King Duncan in one of the rooms in the year 1040. The Queen Mother delights in telling the younger members of her daughter's families the spine-chilling tales that have sprung up about Glamis, how Lord Beardy Crawford and fellow revelers diced with the devil in a tower room and were condemned to stay there, drinking eternally until the day of judgment, of how the Ogilvies, fleeing from the Lindsays during a clan war, were locked in a room and forgotten, starving to death. The Queen Mother herself is one of many who has seen the sad gray lady of Glamis, who haunts the clock tower. She is believed to be the ghost of Janet Douglas, wife of the 6th Lord Glamis, who was burned to death on Castle Hill, Edinburgh in 1537 after being falsely accused of witchcraft and of plotting to poison King James V. There is one Glamis phantom that few in the family have ever been prepared to talk about. Victorian high society was alive with rumors that a hideous, misshapen beast of a man had been born into the Strathmore clan, an immensely strong and hairy egg-shaped creature whose head ran straight into a huge body which was supported by toy-like legs and arms. Unable to reveal the monster's existence, yet unable to kill it, the family were said to have locked their odd offspring in one of the secret rooms built at Glamis in the last years of the 17th century. There it lived for years, known only to the Earl of Strathmore, his lawyer and land agent, and when he reached 21, the Earl's heir. Guests returned from Glamis with strange noises that fueled the gossip. Many said they had been woken in the night by the howls and snarls of an animal. One woman claimed she saw a pale face with huge, mournful eyes staring at her from a window across the courtyard. When it disappeared, she heard appalling screams and watched an old woman scurry across the yard carrying a large bundle. In 1869, a Mrs. Monroe woke in her bedroom at the castle to feel a beard brush her face. As she fumbled for a light, the shape that had been standing over her shambled into the next room where her son was sleeping. The boy's scream of terror brought Mrs. Monroe and her husband racing to his bedside. As he explained that he had just seen a giant, they all heard a crash. At breakfast next morning, other guests too said that they had heard the crash, and one said she had been woken by the mournful whines of her small dog, but their host could offer no explanation. In 1865, a workman who found a secret passage and claimed to have seen something alive in a room off of it was subsidized and induced to emigrate. In 1877, essayist Augustus Hart watched the Bishop of Brechin offer to share the burden that was making the then Earl of Strathmore morose at a host party. Hare reported, Lord Strathmore said that in his most unfortunate position, no one could ever help him. Andrew Ralstone, land agent to the Strathmores from 1860 to 1912, was once asked for the full story by the Countess, grandmother of Queen Elizabeth II. He replied, Lady Strathmore, it is fortunate you do not know it, for if you do, you would never be happy. Dowager Lady Granville, the grandmother's or queen mother's sister, once admitted, we were never allowed to talk about it when we were children. Our parents forbade us to ever discuss the matter or ask any questions about it. My father and grandfather refused absolutely to discuss it. And the 12th Earl, the Queen's great-grandfather, was quoted as saying, if you could only guess the nature of the secret, you would go down on your knees and thank God it was not yours. His warning failed to deter historians and ghost hunters. For years, they tried to unravel the nature of the secret. Once, towels were flown from the window of every known room to try to locate the possible hideaways. Experts combed the family tree for clues, and in the 1920s, journalist Paul Bloomfield came up with what he seemed was a plausible explanation. According to Burke's Peerage, the Bible, a British nobility, Lord Glamis, heir to Thomas, the 11th Earl of Strathmore, married Charlotte Grimsted on December 21st, 1820, and then was presented with an heir, Thomas George, later the 12th Earl, on September 22nd, 1822. But when Bloomfield checked Douglas Scott's peerage, he surmised that Lord Glamis and his wife also had a son who born and died on October 21st, 1821. Another reference book gave the date as October 18th. Bloomfield guessed that the firstborn son did not die, but was badly deformed. He could never inherit the title and estates. Expected to live only a few days, he was kept alive and well cared for, but he survived both his father and his younger brother. A third son, Cloud, became the 13th Earl and was succeeded in 1904 by his own boy, Cloud George, born in 1855, who became the father of the Queen Mother. It is believed that he was the last heir to be initiated into the grim family secret when he reached the age of 21 on March 14, 1876. His son as successor, Timothy, was never told the story, although he once said, I feel sure that there is a corpse or a coffin bricked up in the castle walls somewhere, but they are so thick that you could search for a week without finding anything. Today, the legend of the monster lives on only in the name of the rooftop lead path where he may have exercised that night, which was the Mad Earl's Walk. The Grey Lady still prays silently in a chapel. Spirits still haunt the room where the Strathmore personal hangman used to sleep, and Earl Bertie is still seen, a huge old man with a flowing beard, sitting by a fire in one of the castle bedrooms. Yet for all their ghosts, none of the royal palaces and castles rank as the most haunted place in Britain. That title rests with an ancient fortification that kings and queens of earlier ages used for less civilized purposes. And then that mini segment is called Corpse in the Bed, and here's what it says. A gruesome ghost haunts St. James's Palace in London. The figure of a man propped up in a bed with his jaw hanging open over a gashed throat. It has been frequently seen since the night of May 31st, 1810, when Celis, the Italian-born valet of Ernest Augustus, Duke of Cumberland and fifth son of King George III, was discovered dead on his bed. The Duke told the inquest that when he returned from a night at the opera, Celis had tried to kill him, failed, and then committed suicide. He denied later gossip that he had murdered his valet because he was being blackmailed after seducing the man's daughter. Oh yeah, and there's another little mini segment. It's called Long Live the Dead King. Here's what it says. The ghost of King George IV stalks the underground passages of Brighton Pavilion, the place he loved the most. He built a Sussex landmark after secretly marrying Mrs. Fisherbert while he was Prince Regent. His specter has been encountered both in the passage that leads to the stables, now the dome, and then in a tunnel which once linked the royal cellars with those of the Druids' Head Inn. The pavilion was sold to the town of Brighton by Queen Victoria for €50,000. And then that's it. Let's go ahead and let's wrap up this segment here. I'll continue another new segment within the next part here, the next video. And let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. Wow, what a really fascinating story. I have not heard about that poor, unfortunate young man, whoever that was apparently born horribly deformed and then born in secrecy or raised in secrecy afterward. And then he haunts that particular castle, at least while he was still alive. It was amazing to read all of those particular encounters that people had. If there was one encounter, maybe two, you can chalk it up to other things. But the fact that multiple people over multiple times, and it sounds like a lot of them were multiple guests as well, all had that same frightful set of encounters with a huge being. In this case, it was described as a hairy egg-shaped creature, somebody that was really, really large, huge body, immensely strong, but had toy-like legs and arms. Well, there it was, apparently shunned from existence, but still living within that particular castle. And then they would see it roam about here and there. Obviously, it was moving about at night, trying to see what it can see. And then in some cases, people saw it at the same time. And then, of course, they would hear it as well. Apparently, those mournful cries that it had too. And then every now and then it was seen somewhere in the actual garden as well. The most fascinating part to me was apparently it had its own exercise area, whatever this poor guy was, somewhere called the Mad Earl's Walk. So those of you that happen to go to that particular castle, and let's say you're able to roam to that area that's called the Mad Earl's Walk, you may have been in an area right there back in the 17th century or so where this misshapen person, whoever this quote-unquote monster was, that he was there, and that was his nighttime area. Like, in other words, that was his area to be able to go out there in peace. Crazy stuff. I may just do a video about whoever this person was, whoever was there in secrecy, because it's so fascinating. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.